Welcome to Real Lift Systems, where simplicity and precision parts combine to create a reliable and production-oriented product for lifting cellular and pleated shades. Now let's see how the system works. The Real Lift system was designed so that the motor and tube move from right to left in the headrail. As the tube rotates, it threads itself inside a fixed block. The tube moves a calculated distance with each revolution, causing the cords to wind up on the tube with complete accuracy each and every time. Now let's take a look at how easy it is to install a Real Lift system on your shades. Step 1. Ordering your shades. It is important to know some specifications before you order the shades you wish to motorize. At this time, Real Lift Systems Incorporated is not aware of any cellular or pleated shade product that cannot be motorized using the new Real Lift system AC headrail and the Real Lift's patented lift system. The minimum size on the new Real Lift headrail is 25 inches by 200 inches, and the maximum size on the new Real Lift headrail is 216 inches by 200 inches. Maximum length is calculated using the maximum number of turns on the Somfy 400 series motor. If you are ordering shades from a manufacturer, they should be ordered with a standard headrail whenever possible. If you are able to specify where you want your route holes, make sure that the first and last route holes on the shades are a minimum of 6 inches in from each end. For shades using a headrail control, the route holes must be ordered a minimum of 10 inches in from the end. If the first and last route holes do not meet a minimum of 6 inches, you will need to redirect the strings inside the headrail. If you have to redirect the cords, you must redirect all of the cords or the shade will not be level. Step 2. Preparing your shade. The Real Lift system only works with 0.9mm or 1.4mm cord. If your shade has tape or a cord larger than 1.4mm, the shade will have to be restrung. If you have to restring your shade, cut the cords the length of the shade plus 18 inches for tying knots in the bottom rail and for having extra on the top. Hang your shade upside down from angle brackets attached to a lift to measure and mark your cords. Next, hang small hand clamps from the strings. This puts equal weight on the cords and makes the marking of the cords more accurate. Add 3/8 of an inch to the finished length of the shade and then mark the cords. If you are accurate in this step, it will not be necessary to make any adjustments to the shade when you are setting the limits. Next, return the shade to the table. At this time, you may have to change out the stiffener on certain shades. For the 1 1/4 inch Hunter Douglas Duet, remove the existing stiffener and replace with a 1.5 inch stiffener. Because you will be using new cord guides, any stiffeners drilled with holes larger than 1/8 of an inch will also have to be replaced. Step 3. Cutting the headrail and tube. First, lay the shade on the work surface. With the front of the shade facing up, measure the width of the fabric. Next, measure the distance between the first and last route holes. Cut a piece of headrail the width of the fabric. Add 5 inches to the measurement you took between the route holes and cut a piece of 40mm tube. Notch the end of the tube to fit the key on the crown of the motor. File any burrs off the headrail and tube. Place the headrail behind the shade, upside down with the front of the headrail facing away from you. Line the headrail up to the fabric and using a speed square, mark the headrail at each of the cord locations. You will notice there is a center line etched in the headrail as a drill guide. Drill a 7/32 inch hole at each mark you just created and deburr the holes. It's important to make sure that your drill has a pilot tip and drills a perfectly round hole or the snap and grommet will not fit properly. Next, put a cord guide on each of the cords and make sure they fit securely in the stiffener. Pull all of the cords to the right or left side and slide the headrail onto the shade, making sure that the cord guides are in the correct slot. Now, slide the headrail about 1/2 an inch past the end of the fabric. Use a small hook and fish the cords through the holes drilled in the headrail. Slide the headrail back so it lines up with the fabric. Check to see if the holes line up with the cords. Next, thread a snap-in grommet onto the end of the cord and snap it into the headrail. Check to see that the cords have not tangled or gotten caught up by raising or lowering the shade while holding the cords. You have now finished with the shade preparation and are ready to start on the motor subassembly. Step 4. Motor subassembly. These are the parts needed for the motor subassembly. This is the motor and the crown and drive for this motor. This is the motor block with its 2 mounting screws. And this is the threaded drive, the threaded block, and the notched tube. First, put the crown and drive onto the motor. Next, take the motor block and screw it to the motor head with 2 number 6 1-inch Phillips countersink screws. It is very important not to over-tighten these screws. If your shade requires a center support, slide it onto the tube at this time. We suggest using a center support when your shade is wider than 84 inches. Next, insert the threaded drive into the unnotched end of the tube. Because the inside diameter of extruded tubes vary, you may have to tap the threaded drive in with a hammer or tape it to create a snug fit. Either way, it is absolutely essential that the threaded drive be centered and square to the tube. Make a mark on the tube 16 3/4 inches from the notched end and 3/8 of an inch from the unnotched end. Roll the tube 180 degrees and make a second set of marks. These measurements and the length of the screws are very important. The tube, drive, and motor shaft must all be fastened together and the threaded drive secured to the tube. The rear lift system moves inside of the headrail. Because of this fact, it is crucial that you do this step correctly. If not, the drive may separate from the motor or the threaded drive could be pulled out of the tube. Next, slide the motor into the tube and match up the key in the crown with a notch in the tube. Next, drill a 3/32 inch hole through the tube and the drive at the mark you just made, 16 3/4 inches from the notched end. Then, drill another hole 3/8 of an inch from the unnotched end of the tube through the tube and into the threaded drive. Countersink the holes and screw the drive and the threaded drive to the tube using number 4 5/8 inch Phillips countersink screws. All of the screws in the tube must be flush with the tube. Next, turn the tube 180 degrees and drill a second set of holes on your marks. Countersink and set your screws. Then, screw the threaded block onto the threaded drive until the threaded drive is 3/16 of an inch from the end of the threaded block. You have now finished the motor assembly and are ready to assemble the shade. Step 5. Final assembly. You will always be assembling your shade with the motor on your right, even if your shade is a motor left. For right motors, place the shade on the table with the front of the shade facing you. For left motors, place the shade on the table with the front facing away from you. In either case, pull all the cords to the right end of the headrail. On the right end of the headrail, slide the threaded block into the headrail. Once the threaded block is at least 6 inches inside the headrail, pull the cords up and over the back of the headrail. Continue to slide the motor assembly all the way into the headrail. Next, hook the motor up to a switch in order to find the lower limit. Run the motor counterclockwise or away from you until it hits its limit. Adjust the limit until the notch in the tube is centered in the headrail opening. Also check to see if the threaded drive is flush with the threaded block. If not, slide the threaded block out of the left end of the headrail and adjust it by screwing the threaded block in or out. Now, pull the cord closest to the motor head straight up. Adjust the motor assembly inside the headrail until it measures 2 inches from the cord to the end of the tube. Go to the center of the threaded block and drill a 3/32 inch hole into the back edge of the headrail and into the block. Use a number 4 1/4 inch Phillips pan head screw to secure the threaded block to the headrail. Cut a piece of 3M number 396 Super Bonder film, approximately 1 inch in length, for each cord and temporarily stick it to the edge of the headrail. Important, do not skip this step. The tape assures that the shade will not come out of adjustment. Pull each cord straight up out of the headrail and make a mark on the edge of the headrail. Make a 3-inch long jig out of 3/4 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/16 of an inch aluminum angle. With the 3/4 inch leg pointing up, lay the jig up against the front of the headrail. On the 1/2 inch edge of the jig, draw a short line down the center of the tube. Then, turn the jig 90 degrees to the headrail. With the 1/2 inch leg pointing towards the motor, line the back of the jig up to the mark on the headrail. Draw a line down the face of the 1/2 inch leg that crosses your first line on the tube. Do this for every cord location. It is important to make these marks in this way so that the shade lifts perfectly level every time. Next, locate the mark you already made on your cord. With the end of the cord pointing to the right, lay it parallel to the tube on the cross mark. Using the piece of tape you just cut, tape the string to the tube. Snap the cord clip over the tape and the cord on the tube. Tap your end caps into both ends of the headrail and your shade is ready to hang. Final step, setting the limits. Hang the appropriate brackets on a lift. Raise the lift if necessary until the shade is a couple of inches off the floor and hanging freely. Next, attach your test switch to the motor leads and run your shade up to set the upper limit. Then run the shade down to the lower limit and measure the shade on both sides and in the middle. If any adjustments are required, adjust the lower limit or pull the appropriate cord to level the shade. When you are satisfied the shade is level and set at a finished length, cut the excess cord off, leaving approximately 1 inch extra. Then, run the shade up and down to check the final limits. If you are shipping your shade, it is recommended that after running the shade to the top, you back the upper limit off a 1/4 turn. This will avoid the shade coming out of adjustment in the shipping process and the handling of the shade while installing.